Effectively securing your organization and its reputation requires a smarter approach. To maximize efficiency and minimize risk, security experts turn to LogRhythm, the only leading solution built solely for security teams by a security team committed to your success. With next-gen SIEM, user and entity behavior analytics, network traffic and behavior analysis, security automation and orchestration, and compliance, LogRhythm provides security made smarter. The greatest threat to businesses today isn't the outsider trying to get in. It's the people you trust, the ones who already have the keys, your employees, your contractors, and privileged users. 60% of online attacks are carried out by insiders. To stop these insider threats, you need to see what users are doing before an incident occurs. Observit combats insider threats by detecting risk activity, investigating in minutes, effectively responding, and stopping data lost. Give it a test drive at observit.com/securityweekly. Today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/ESW. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. Quick announcement. April 1st through the 3rd is InfoSec World 2019. Our listeners can get a 15% off discount by using the code OS19-SECWEEK. So make sure you do that. And some big news this week, Mr. Matt Alderman. We should probably start with the acquisition of Javelin Networks by Symantec, which we talked about at the end of Business Security Weekly. But, of course, congratulations to all of our fine friends at Javelin. It's such a great group of people to work with, and I'm very happy for them. And their technical expertise, is specifically with Active Directory, is damn impressive. And they've shared a lot of that knowledge on the show. Which is just awesome. It's really awesome. So,
yeah, and it's 2 weeks in a row for a sponsor being acquired, right? Last week it was Layered Insight by Qualys. This week, Javelin Networks by Symantec. So it kind of a good run for the shows with a couple of our sponsors.
And they also threw into this announcement that they acquired another security vendor, Unified Enterprise and Mobile Threat Protection AppThority.
Yeah, so it's kind of a double announcement here. They acquired Javelin, which we all know from the shows, and then AppThority on the mobile side. I've seen these guys around for a while, bolstering out aspects of the mobile portfolio. The first couple stories and the last story are going to tie together in some interesting ways. But yeah, it's two very interesting acquisitions here by Symantec.
Yeah, that is interesting. Is Symantec kind of shifts, right? They sell off some of the businesses and they acquire new ones as they kind of reposition themselves in the market, which is interesting.
Yeah, and that leads into the second article, which I thought was really, really interesting, is Thoma Bravo to buy Veracode. Now, if everybody remembers, CA bought Veracode earlier this year for, what was it, like $650 million.
Something like that, yeah.
So now Thoma Bravo is buying Veracode from CA as part of the Broadcom acquisition for, I think, $950 million, which is very interesting, right? Because CA was building up a really interesting application security portfolio. As most listeners know, app user data. I love the spaces. They're the things that survive any digital transformation. And CA had the identity side. They were doing some stuff on data. They were building out an app portfolio with the Veracode acquisition, the SourceClear acquisition.
And SourceClear was what? Did they have an open source security monitoring solution? Is that SourceClear?
Yes. Yeah, that was SourceClear. Okay. So kind of like Black Duck and Sonatype, looking at the open source libraries, right? So CA was building out this really nice portfolio. They get bought by Broadcom, and they spin out Veracode to Thoma Bravo, who bought Imperva, web app firewall.
Yeah.
Right. So Thoma Bravo's building out a very interesting security portfolio, which leads into your last story, which is the rumors that Thoma Bravo has approached Symantec to potentially buy Symantec out. And so this news kind of broke yesterday. A little bit. I saw some of the back and forth on this, and think about that for a second, right? Thoma Bravo's, if they bought Symantec after some of these other acquisitions, think about the security portfolio that sits under Thoma Bravo for a second. And so some of my friends were out pinging me yesterday about this. Is that good, bad? The other thing, I think it's interesting because the one thing I've always had a little bit of concern with Symantec is, are they an enterprise security company or a consumer security company, right? They have the consumer portfolio that they've continued to expand with, not only with the Norton product, but they also bought LifeLock, which I use for my stuff. So you have this big consumer portfolio, but you also have this enterprise security company. And so, if Thoma Bravo bought it, do they keep both pieces? Do they maybe spin one out and rebundle some stuff? I think it would be really fascinating to see how kind of this whole strategy for Thoma Bravo plays out. But these three articles all pretty interlinked this week in the news.
Yeah, that is interesting. And so are they, Thoma Bravo, are they funding some companies and fully acquiring others, or are those details is that too much inside baseball?
Well, I mean, remember, so they also, I think Thoma Bravo has also bought Logarithm, who's a sponsor as well, right?
That's correct.
So what they're doing is they're going in and buying I think majority shareholdership in these companies, bringing them under the Thoma Bravo name. Thoma Bravo did this with Tripwire, brought Tripwire in, did some work, spun it out to Belden. They're a traditional private equity firm that's doing transactions. So like I said, they're building up a really interesting security portfolio. The question is, what pieces, parts get combined or spun back out? It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. It's just it's fascinating to me to watch how some of these PE firms work.
Yeah, I think it could be good for Symantec to get bought, and I think that one of the things that happens is that there tends to be an influx of innovation, and then that sets up the next move, right? And I don't know what that is, for Symantec, but it could breathe some innovation, and especially with Symantec's more recent acquisitions, really reposition Symantec in the market, which I'm kind of surprised they haven't made more acquisitions to enhance their endpoint product. But I guess some they look at as competition, but certainly interesting. I don't think Symantec's going anywhere. I'd be curious to see what their valuation is too. I mean,
I think that would be interesting to a lot of public companies to see what kind of valuation Thoma Bravo puts on them. Yeah,
for sure. Let's see what else we got in the news. KnowBe4's new GRC platform is entering into the risk management arena, which I thought was kind of interesting. I think of KnowBe4 as not so much a GRC and compliance company, but more of an end-user security awareness and training company. So I was a little kind of taken back by this announcement.
Yeah, I was miffed by this one too, actually, because I went out and I said, wait a minute, GRC, I know a lot of the GRC players. I was in that space for a long time, and I go to their website and it's security awareness, it's phishing, and I'm like, this is kind of odd. It just it kind of out of left field. It's not part of their kind of core message. I don't, you have to dig in to find the GRC product. I don't see much on their homepage about it at all. So yeah, it's kind of out of left field for me. Why GRC platform? Look, there's big players out there. There's new startups in this space. I don't know how a security awareness phishing company really addresses the broader governance, risk management, and compliance. I don't know.
Interesting announcement. ThreatQuotient had an announcement this week that it looks like they're integrating a new source of data from the Visa investigations team, specifically for obviously payment type, threat intelligence, which is interesting. Now, I want to take a step back and think about this space, as this space has grown so far past traditional threat intelligence, right? If you look at what I believe are the major players in this space, you've got ThreatConnect, ThreatQuotient, Anomaly, and Recorded Future. And I believe they've all had a lot of different announcements and kind of pivots into different areas. ThreatConnect had the announcement that they're integrating SOAR into the platform. Recorded Future does some really cool stuff that I feel like goes above and beyond traditional threat intelligence, and some of the other vendors do as well. So this has been a difficult space to navigate because it gets lumped into, and I'm sure Gartner, right, puts them in threat intelligence platforms, right? But there's a lot more underneath the covers that I'm excited that we're going to have the opportunity to explore, through the show and our work as analysts now in the industry. So,
yeah, and I mean, this is interesting. It's another set of indicators of potential compromise on payment transaction stuff. I think it's good to have. The question is ThreatQuotient going to be the only source for this data? Is it going to be available elsewhere? But you see them all trying to figure out how to bring more of that data into their platforms to continue to drive value for their customers. So, I mean, it makes sense. It's a good announcement. I just don't know if Visa is going to do this with others or it's going to be exclusive. It'll be interesting to see how some of this plays out.
Absolutely. Now, this next one in here, I did not get a chance to research, but I put it in there because it's something like we've never really talked about. A company, Dahua Technology. Have you heard of them before?
No, this is more home security based on the way I read this article. It's really doing monitoring around the perimeter of your home, not necessarily your network.
Okay. Okay. That could be why. Yeah. AI powered facial recognition technology, which is interesting. Yeah. I wasn't sure if they were targeting enterprises or home.
Looks like home consumer stuff for me. Yeah. That's what it looked like to me.
Their language is very much enterprise security, not consumer security focused. So I don't know if this was an announcement for investors or some kind of market play, but I can't see the home user reading that and really being kind of
understanding it.
Yeah, and being in their language, right? Like they use very enterprisey type terms in there. But I think there are a lot of physical security systems that certainly will segue into the enterprise and become more integrated into the security kind of architecture. But yeah.
I kind of skipped it. Sorry.
That's okay. FireMon delivers hybrid cloud security with new visibility and orchestration capabilities, which is a natural pivot that I think many in the traditional, obviously, firewall management, I guess for lack of a better term, firewall management space, right, are trying to make pivots into different things. And orchestration, I think, is something they already knew how to do, right? I think they're just going to apply it to different technologies, which is fine. And I think if you can, get value out of the firewall management process and also leverage it for some orchestration capabilities, that's a good thing. And we're seeing a lot of pivots in that arena. Yeah,
I mean, look, this is a natural announcement. I have to be in the cloud and on-prem, so I need a hybrid solution because that's how customers are using technology today. And orchestration, we've been talking about you and I have been talking about this forever, right? We're finally seeing the pickup of more orchestration automation solutions, natural fit for FireMon to add those capabilities and then also make it available for both on-premise and cloud infrastructure. It's a natural move of where all these vendors are ultimately going to have to go.
Absolutely. What else we got? There's an
security.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I was looking at some market data that was kind of analyzing or displaying the players in fraud protection and prevention, and it's an interesting space. A lot of funding going into that space. I think when you apply the techniques of machine learning and or AI to monitor for fraud, I think it's a much more concrete kind of use case, right? There's a lot less variables in many cases when we talk about fraud. And so there's a lot of funding into security firms that are, driving anti-fraud prevention. And that's a broad term for, I think, a lot of different technologies. I think that was one of my takeaways from that market analysis was, what kind of fraud are they protecting against? I mean, certainly, if you're a PCI merchant, there's credit card fraud, but then the, payment providers have to worry about that level of fraud. But I think a financial institution like a bank has a different, maybe, aspects of fraud that they have to worry about, certainly. And then, your e-commerce retailer, how do I know people aren't essentially stealing on a fraud basis, right? Then you've got payment providers like PayPal and what is the newfangled one that all the hipsters using? Venmo? Is it Venmo? Did I say that right? Venmo?
Venmo?
I
don't remember.
Yeah. Venmo. I did say it right. they've got a different, kind of fraud that might take place, right? So, and I think that's why the fraud market is becoming more broad and ending up on our radar in security, because there's a lot of different aspects to it. I'm not sure which one Shape Security was in, but
yeah, RSA has had a fraud portfolio for a while. When I was there, 2012 to 2014, fraud was a big part of the business. It tied in a little bit to the identity, but they still have fraud services out there. This one looks to be more on the identity credential imitation type attacks of fraud, where people are trying to impersonate somebody else. It's kind of where it looked like this article and in what Shape Security was doing. It's interesting because Allegis Capital's here, Bob Ackerman in this round. I don't know if he was in previous rounds. I didn't go back and look at all the funding history. These guys have $130 million in after this Series E. So it's an interesting technology. I just don't know the fraud space that well, even though I was at RSA for a few years, because I was more focused on the GRC front.
Have you looked into Lookout for mobile? Yeah, that's their mobile security, right? I feel like we don't cover mobile security enough.
Not much. Yeah, I mean, we know some folks that went over to Lookout that we used to do work with in the past. I don't know them very well. I know they're in the mobile security space. Obviously, mobile is a concern. Like I said, I think last week or a couple weeks ago, I still don't use mobile banking. I just don't trust it yet. But yeah, this was more of an announcement for Middle East partnerships with Lookout, which means Lookout is starting to expand over into the Middle East. Nuvias Partners is in the Middle East, right? So this is more of an expansion story for Lookout, moving beyond maybe the North American market into the Middle East. There's a lot of mobile overseas in some of these markets. So, looking at mobile security is probably some good moves from an expansion standpoint for them.
Yeah, there's when you deploy an MDM solution, I don't know, do they call it? They don't really call it MDM anymore. I think we've largely gotten away from that as an industry term. Mobile protection, I think, is more, where it falls. But those projects are very tricky, right? Anytime you're trying to secure that end device that's, in the user's hands, I think the struggle in the challenge today, quite frankly, is that devices are so cheap that the users just go get a dedicated device, either for their personal or for their work, and then doesn't matter if they're putting some kind of management solution on there because it's not interrupting their workflow. I've run into this in a couple of different cases where basically devices are so cheap now that people just go get new ones, or have two, right?
Yeah, you carry two. You carry one for work, so you get to work email because you have all this mobile security stuff load and you can't do anything else. And then you carry your personal to go do everything else, which is bypassing part of the rationale of having the mobile security in the first place. But look, people are doing it and they're going to continue to do it because users don't want to be shut down from accessing other stuff.
Yes.
And I know why corporations want to try to do it, but users are just going to go get another device and go around it.
Yeah. And I think in my experiences recently, the enforcement of authentication to the device really is a tricky usability versus security thing. And I think it's the fault of society as we've progressed with mobile devices. We like it to be very easy to access our device, right? And I think that corporations say, well, if you're going to access sensitive data, that authentication process, you have to have a much higher level of security, and that's not something people are accustomed to, right? They want a quick, easy fingerprint, facial recognition, maybe a short passcode, right? But it's very similar to the way hospital employees and doctors, have to authenticate to do their jobs. That's how people are interfacing with mobile. I want to pick up my phone and not have to worry about going through a complicated multi-factor authentication process or enter a really long PIN number that if I get it wrong, now my device is locked and now I can't do anything. That's bad. So I think the usability and security aspect of mobile device security is interesting and challenging.
Very, because we want it instantly. That's the way we think, and we don't want many barriers to get to the data we want to get to, and it's just human nature.
Right. I mean, we as security professionals, I think we put up with a little more, less usability, I should say, to accomplish that. I'm using a physical two-factor in combination with, my Android phone, which requires sometimes if I want to authenticate the stuff, I got to go either like an NFC two-factor or plug into the USB-C port. In addition to entering my password, like for LastPass on my phone, that's how it's set up. So, but there's some inconvenience that couples that I'm willing to go through for my phone, but most typical users aren't willing to go through that inconvenience.
True, including my wife. She hates that I have two-factor Google Authenticator set up on her email account. But I'm like, well, that's the way it's going to run.
Right. That's why, to go back to, come full circle to the Edgewise when they're applying that to applications, it's also why I like that tactic for authenticating users to devices, right? Because it's much more usable, but also, if done correctly, can provide, I think, that same layer of security, but I think the technology is emerging and maturing. I think quickly enough we're going to see that in a lot of organizations. And if you think about it on the enterprise front, mobile aside, right, if you've got an identity service, a single sign-on service, coupled with authentication, basically your authentication could potentially give you access to every single application, right? So the authentication behind that has to be really strong. And typically that's a physical two-factor. People lose them. There's all those headaches that are associated with it. I think Duo made huge strides, obviously had a very successful exit and a lot of great customer success stories from Duo on that front because I think they were able to make it usable and easy to implement. I think that's why they essentially won in that space is where how I would phrase it, because they tackled those things. It's not necessarily a technical thing, right? But it has to be operationally efficient and easy to use, which is not easy to do.
Yeah, and there's a number of new startups in this market too. Mm-hmm. And I think you're going to see more of this, right? Leveraging all this data about how you use things and where you are in your phone, et cetera, to make it easier to authenticate into applications. So I at some point, we'll probably do a segment just on that because there are a number of new startups in that space that I think are really interesting to track and watch.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everyone for watching this edition of Enterprise Security Weekly. Matt, thank you very much. And that will conclude the show. Thank you for listening and watching. We'll see you next time.